Hey everyone, it's Dr. RAMANI. Welcome back to this YouTube channel. So here's our question of the day. Are narcissistic people bad people? Drop it in the comments and let's take this one on. Okay, so let me repeat that question. Are narcissistic people bad people? My answer is this: it's the wrong question. When we let this conversation about the impact of narcissistic personalities and the behaviors that folks with these personalities bring into the relationships and the role of antagonism, when we have this conversation, it makes no sense, and it's actually a little bit risky to let this devolve into some moral and philosophical conversation about good versus bad or good versus evil. When we go there, we miss the subtlety, the nuance, and most importantly, the confusion raised by these relationships, and can make it harder for people to get help if they are in one of these relationships. There's no doubt that, especially in a relationship characterized with somebody who has more severe narcissism or more severe narcissistic patterns, that person's conduct may be so chronically invalidating, dehumanizing, betraying, and cruel that, yeah, it feels bad. However, got to remember too that that kind of severity is not sort of the norm in terms of narcissistic people. This personality style is really tricky. When a person with a narcissistic personality feels well regulated, has enough validation, has enough supply, these people with these personalities, these relationships, actually feel like they work for a minute. There may be flashes of empathy. There may be good moments. It may feel real and connected, and it will be like that until the narcissistic person doesn't feel regulated or validated or well supplied. And then it may be, then very quickly, it is going to devolve into blame shifting, anger, manipulation, contempt, and dismissiveness. Many people in narcissistic relationships feel like they are in a relationship with two different people, the good one and the bad one, the Jekyll and the Hyde. They aren't two different people, they're one person, and that's why your heart's getting broken on a regular basis. It's a slippery slope when we start talking good versus bad because it's too simple. The reason people get stuck in narcissistic relationships, whether with partners or family or work or anything, and for such a long time they get stuck, is that there's often enough good days, enough decent memories to keep a person stuck. And when you scramble that up with duty, obligation, familiarity, culture, survival, and hope, it becomes less about good versus bad and more about understanding how these relationships and personality styles work. In a narcissistic person, just as with any person, there are going to be some things in them that are functional and somewhat decent. All of us do have some healthy and unhealthy defenses. However, the difference, and this is a key difference, between a person with a narcissistic or an antagonistic personality and a person with a more healthy, agreeable, and flexible personality is that the healthier person is often quite self-aware. They may have a better handle on what makes them tick, on what might be causing their tough day. They may make allowances for that. They then take the time mindfully to not blame others, take responsibility, and do what needs to be done so others don't get hurt. They communicate their feelings. For narcissistic folks, the lack of this self-awareness means that they cannot and won't take stock of their inner world. They have no sense of what motivates them. They have a distorted and inaccurate belief that they are more empathic than they are, more self-aware than they actually are, and don't recognize the dynamics within them, such as insecurity and shame, and how that all plays out for them. It is just more self-protective for them to just lash out at everyone else and blame them and maintain their grandiose, arrogant defenses. Now, when we start getting into the mud about people being bad or good, we oversimplify the human condition and we lose the opportunity for people to take seriously the harm that narcissistic relationships cause. When we oversimplify, people see this as a one-dimensional portrayal of a villain, and that doesn't give us that necessary 360-degree view of a person. There is complexity to how a narcissistic person works, to how any person works. And those good days, when they are well validated, confuse us. And it can feel easier to just try and make it on the bad days, make it about them being bad people, because it makes it easier for us to disengage. I recently made a video about the multiple truths of narcissistic relationships. And that multiple truths, that can be a useful technique for thinking about this. Not as good or bad, but rather as there's a person in my life, they treat me badly pretty often, they lie to me, they betray me. Sometimes we have a nice time. I don't trust them. I do love them. I'm afraid to leave them. I know this relationship isn't good for me. That all doesn't fit. That's really uncomfortable, that list, right? Good versus bad is a lot easier. But when we try to make it so simple, they're just bad, and then they behave in a way that's good, that's when we get confused. That's when we blame ourselves. When we can see the multiple truths operating, and boy, do they operate in these narcissistic relationships, we recognize that this isn't about bad versus good. It's about something that is often not good for me, and that from a compassionate and graceful place, I can disengage a little and maintain realistic expectations instead of treating a roller coaster like it's a relationship. When we make it about good versus bad, the doubters in the mental health community who view the focus on narcissism and the harm that comes to people from narcissistic relationships, there's a lot of people who view this as a witch hunt, rather than clearly seeing how these dynamics in the long run do harm to people in these relationships. And one way to change some of that narrative is to stop making it so simple of good versus bad. Trying to overly simplify complex constructs like love and life and human relationships never ends well. While our myths may be about good versus evil, the myth makers had the advantage of getting to write fiction. For those of us who live in the nonfiction of real life, the confusion of healthy and unhealthy that is the narcissistic relationship means that the myths we have to live in our real lives are a hell of a lot more subtle. Thanks again.